So today the topic is what I wish my boss colleagues knew about mental health challenges. And my guest co-host is Jason Tham. So Jay, if you can wave, do a little wave. There he is.
Hello.
So I'll introduce him more fully later, but before I do that, I just want to talk about a very special person in my life who has passed away by suicide, Maggie Ng. And she's actually the reason we are doing this whole series of live talks, because we want to bring more awareness to people who might be suffering in silence. And there's an opportunity to donate to the Hong Fook Mental Health Foundation in Maggie's honor. And the link is in the registration as well as in the follow-up emails. So here's what you can expect today. We're going to be doing some introductions, telling you a little bit about Jason, a little bit about me. Jay and I are going to do a little discussion around the topic of what workplaces or what boss, leaders, colleagues should know about mental health challenges. And then we're going to do a Q&A, but as most of you have seen, the Q&A is pretty fluid. If you have questions, you can always pop it in the chat and we will pause our talk to address questions that are coming up for you. And at the end, I'm going to talk a bit about the weekly Courage Circle, which actually started last week, and we're going to be continuing on. So I'll talk a bit about that. So here's a little bit about Jason. You'll see that his bio or his story, it's in two parts. Part one is sort of like the official script of who he is. And I'm going to definitely stick to the script and read about that for you. And then the second part of his bio is from me, because Jay and I have known each other for over 23 years. And he's just one of those friends that I can count on for anything. He was actually there for me when I first got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was like one of the first people to know about this. Not at that time, I wasn't sure if it's a good idea because, you know, he's a bit of a, he's great. He's great. I promise not to make fun of him too much. That's something that my husband told me to do. Stick to the script, Yolanda, stick to the script. Okay. So here is something about Jay.
You don't have to, by the way, Yolanda. This is we're gonna have a friendly and I respect what Brian says, but let's have a fun conversation that's open that you and I normally have. It's all
okay.
good.
I know, but we usually don't stick to the script. That's the problem, because he's so easily distracted, and then I get easily distracted, and then it's like, what are we talking about here again? So that's okay. Anyway, so I'll just give you the short bit of this. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, somehow Jason got to do some important things in life, and he became the co-founder and CEO of Nulogy, an amazing company, and he's a leader of a lot of great people. And he is actually a sought after speaker as well. When it's funny, when he gives me advice, I never take them, and vice versa is true too. But he is actually sought after for his industry knowledge. We both graduated from Waterloo in system design engineering, but he's older than me, just so I'm sure everybody knows that already, but like you can tell, like he's definitely older. But some other interesting facts about him is that he is a super dedicated father to two just incredible, amazing girls. I love them so much. And his wife is way cooler than he is. She's not here right now, but she is just this amazing, amazing woman. Don't know how he landed her. For me, though, he is just like one of those salt of the earth kind of people. You know, I can call him anytime that I need him, and I know that he would be there for me. Like he's like that kind of a friend, which is really rare too. I don't say nice things about him very often, but this is recorded, Jay, so you can listen to it over and over again when I make fun of you outside. And Jay is like an elite athlete. He is quite obsessed with doing all kinds of daredevil kind of things. one time he had us on ice and he was holding on to this kite thingy and we were going on ice on a toboggan. I forgot what that's called, but he's just like, he does all kinds of sport stuff. And he's a DJ in his spare time. He actually DJ'd our wedding. So yeah, so he's just like a really interesting guy, you know, definitely probably should look into a diagnosis of ADD as well. But like that just, there's definitely a lot to this guy. But I don't really know the corporate side very well. I just really know the, you know, the fun, loving, annoying friend that I know, which is why I thought it's great for him to be here to have a chat, you know, because it's like a topic that not a lot of people are really willing to share in an open forum, like as leaders, because there's really not a lot of manual and precedents that they can speak about. And I know that Jay would be just very open, authentic. You know, he will know what he knows and he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So that's kind of the conversation that we're going to have today, which would be really fun. And I'm going to just try not to like make fun of him too much, but I think Brian is going to message me and say, stop it, get back on topic, if I do go off topic. So a little bit about me, those of you who may not have had a chance to meet. I am a mom to one super amazing girl and wife to that awesome guy over there, Brian. And so I kind of went from being an engineer to a high school teacher and then serial entrepreneur. I actually did go get a diagnosis or try to get a diagnosis or diagnosed for ADD because a lot of serial entrepreneurs tend to have that element. I'm still working on that. And I'm now a coach, a trainer, a speaker. And what I have the most experience with in my life is living with bipolar disorder. So I've had 23 years of experience with that. And I live with what's called bipolar 1 disorder with rapid cycling. And I've had 2 hospitalizations and collectively had 4 years of disability leave. Actually, last year when I had my hospitalization, Jay brought flowers. And I was so sure that it was from his wife because she's that kind of person that would be just really kind and like, you know, like think of that. But actually, he thought of it. So I was really, really shocked. And, you know, there's a lot of shame around being hospitalized for psychiatric reasons. So no one has ever brought me flowers before. So yeah, I was really touched, shocked at first when he said it was his idea, but then like really touched. So yeah. So I just want to mention that, you know, you're in the right place if you or someone you care about lives with mental health challenges and that you're willing to keep an open mind. I just want to make sure that you exercise self-care. If anything we're discussing is a trigger for you, you know, please take a break or leave. Just make sure that you are taking good care of yourself. And you're definitely in the wrong place if you're seeking any kind of medical or diagnostic advice. Jay and I are not professionals. I know there are a couple in this room right now, like Amy, but I don't think Amy is working. So still not a place to get diagnostic advice. And please make sure that, you know that we don't have all the answers. And we don't have the quick fix either. And if you do have any urgent issues that require professional support, please make sure that you seek that as well. So that's not the purpose of our talk today. So for most of the talk, I'm going to just stop sharing the PowerPoint and really have just kind of like a discussion with me and Jay. And if you think of anything or any questions pop up for you, please just make sure that you put it in the chat. So Jay, anything you want to add that I didn't share about you that you feel like you should add?
No,
Oh, snow kiting. Yes, that's it. Snow kiting.
no, let's go. And you set a low bar, so you know, hopefully everyone here is not gonna expect some great insights from me. And let's hopefully delve into this important topic. Happy to be
Yeah.
here. Thank you for inviting me, Yolanda, on this. We've obviously never done this, as you know. Not like I had any hesitation. I just didn't realize or know if I had much to contribute in this area. But I'm happy to give my point of view as much as I can.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I had my doubts too, but I'm glad that you're here. So I guess my first question to you, this is kind of maybe related to my most recent experience. I was telling Jay that, for the past 8 days, I actually hit a depressive episode, which happens for me because of the rapid cycling nature of my condition. And the 4 days prior to today, I was actually just in bed watching different videos. And that's usually my coping mechanism. And so what came up for me is that I read an article a while ago in Psychology Today that said most people don't fake being ill, they fake being well. And I think for people who live with mental illness, we don't even always believe ourselves that we are ill, that we're not well. So I guess if it's okay with you, Jay, I'd like to kick off with that quote, just that, people don't fake being ill. They actually fake being well.
So my reaction to that, it's probably true in the sense that I don't think that it's intuitive or natural to kind of express or share weakness. And if illness is sort of a point of weakness, then it's probably not the first thing that people to go, toward. Um, and I also think like, most people would also think that maybe most people aren't ill. And if you think about illness, what comes to my mind is has health, and health is sort of a sensitive topic. Like, what do I want to actually disclose? What I don't want to disclose. So there's sort of a sharing component there that unlikely people would gravitate towards the comfort of just going out and putting that out in front. Whereas being seen as strong and healthy and you know um, at normal, let's call it, and not having challenges is probably more likely than not. So that's my reaction to that quote. I don't know where you
Yeah.
pulled it from.
I mean, have you ever had that thought that, if somebody said to you, I'm just I'm not feeling well, I can't come to work, or I need accommodations. Like, do you ever think that they're just using mental illness as an excuse?
I personally don't. I I don't. That's definitely not the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Uh, if it is something that has been shared previously, I think then that sort of logically would make sense if they are going to share that. But I don't think that normally comes to mind. I generally think people are well intentioned, want to be productive in society, want to, from a work perspective, want to, be part of a team and help, further a mission of an organization or their work and that's what I think. And most of my friends and all, I mean, that's what people would do. I mean, just from a sampling perspective. So yeah.
Because I think that is one of the reasons that stops people from sharing with their bosses or colleagues about their mental health challenges. I remember when I was in teaching at the school board, I definitely never shared about living with bipolar disorder, even when I was hit with a series of depressive episodes, because you can't see the illness, right? It's not like I broke something or they can measure something in me, or so even for me experiencing it, I even had doubts whether I was faking it. I even had doubts whether I should just be stronger or more, I don't know, just like better. Maybe that's why I'm not feeling well. And so I think that's what prevents people from sharing as well, because they don't even know themselves. So I'm really glad that, you share that people don't usually think that, especially when you work in a company where you have to go through interview processes, right? You probably would have been able to filter some things out, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so,
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you continue.
So I guess the other part of the fear of people sharing with their boss or colleagues is fearing the impact on their professional careers. So once they tell you, let's say, for example, if I worked at Nulogy and I said, I want to let you know that I live with bipolar disorder, one of my concerns would be, would I be overlooked for a promotion, or would people treat me differently, or I wouldn't get that project that I really would love to do, you know?
I think that's fair. I think I understand the fear in general. Because sharing challenges, in particular any personal health ones, as I mentioned, is sensitive. It's personal to one's life, but then in everyone's life today, you have this intertwined dimension of both interpersonal and professional life. So it's almost very difficult to untangle. But I think it's hard to, in general, to sharing weakness, vulnerabilities, and kind of sharing that you're different. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I so that fear is I can get. We've all had points of vulnerability and been down and out, and then who do you go to, right? Like that's not, you have to think about that, right? Who do I really want to share that with? And if it's your boss, your employer, someone seemingly who's supposed to judge you for your performance, if you know what I mean, is
Mm-hmm.
that's not probably the first outlet that one would go to. But then I do think of, let's think of the counter truth to that as well. uh what does an employer want, and how different are people? Like, what is normal? I kind of don't like the saying that, what's the average human? Like, what is average, right? Like, we have whatever 8 billion people. I think of my sister, Yolanda. I have a twin sister. I mean, in theory, we're very similar. We're sampled from the same genetic pool, right? But we're so different. Like, my friends would say that, and this is true, like, she's taller, stronger,
Better looking.
more athletic, smarter, more intelligent, whatever it is. But in truth, like, she's very different from me, right?
Yeah.
Very, very different, but we're twins. So from a nature perspective, we actually might have come from a similar background or very same genetic pool, but whatever happened, like, we were, all humans, if we're all 99% the same, why are we all so different? So that variability, I think we so the question is, why should we embrace that? That may be more the question, is why should
Mm.
we embrace that and not
Yeah.
uh, consider and be drawn towards a pull of conformity, to say, like, I'm normal and that's what I want to bring forward to my friends, my employer, my manager, and so forth. And why is there strength in that? So one thing, I say, like, we're all different, and there's this nature versus nurture. So the nurture side of things is like the environment, right? That we are working in.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations where we spend, like, whatever, at least 8 hours of our life in. I think employers. I think there's one point from employers, and there's one part from a manager or leader. Employers will want to create an environment that is, safe, supportive, but I think there's more important things from a manager or leader. that you have to consider. And a person's not going to just share things that are maybe sensitive and points of challenge or weakness if there isn't trust, right? If there isn't that psychological safety there to be able to share. But there's the saying of like managers are directive and leaders are connective. A good leader will connect with their employee, the person they're managing, because they're going to get the best out of that person. So what is the definition of leadership, right? Like to bring the best out of people. And if you're not able to connect with that person or the people that you're working with, it's going to be very difficult. So I'm just kind of sharing the counterfactual that, while there's a fear, and it under the right sort of environment, under the right comfort of trust and predicated on that, I think that there is mutual benefits for both the employee and the employer. So why the employee? Well, if something goes, if something you can't explain, if there is an illness, mental, physical, whatever, maybe, it's then more logical why the employee can logically understand why that is. Maybe there's a depressive episode, as you kind of mentioned, right? That doesn't allow that person to come to be there at their best in that workplace. Same goes true for the employer or the manager, because you as a leader, you do want to have your people put into positions where they can feel their best, be their best. And I think that I'm not a biologist or whatever, but we do know that we have this sort of fight or flight system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're in this like limbic system that we're having, fight or flight, we're not going to be able to be creative. We're not going to be able to be our best. So I think having an environment where your team, your employees are able to be more vulnerable and share what environment they can be at their best is probably best for that employer and for that leader as well. I think it works both ways though, right? Like there's a responsibility for an employee to understand what their responsibilities are, right? And what they've signed up for as well. So it has to, and that also is like, can be surfaced with and easily surfaced if there is that trust, if there is that psychological safety. And like people don't want to walk around saying like, I'm happy or am I sad, or I'm happy or am I sad. But if you can explain things, then it does. I'm gonna just digress for a moment, and you know that I riff sometimes, but I have this like view of like this window. Like I've known you for 20 years, right, Yolanda? But I just only see a certain window. And you're like a condo or a house. Like I don't know what happens. I can only see through that window or the couple of windows. What's happening in your house, what battles you may be facing, what's going on, really I can't see, right?
Yeah.
So those things all affect you. I think that being able to share that is helpful to a leader, and you can harness that. Now, how and why can you harness that? Mental, and we've already put this disclaimer. I'm not a specialist, not an expert in this area, but when I think of mental health, there's such a cognitive component to it, but there's such an emotional component to it, right? And psychological component to it. And we're a tech company. You introduced me as Newlogy CEO, founder, and today's day and age, I think everyone on this chat will know that AI is a very big thing, right? Like but what is AI lacking? AI has all the can always be on for the cognitive state, but what it's lacking is the emotional and psychological state. We know that, right? So if for us to be more human, I think that bringing about and sharing that emotional component um, allows us to also be more creative, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, like, think of this pot, or think of this event that you're doing, and this you are doing this because you're passionate about not only mental health but your bipolar case. And that passion, I don't know if a computer or an AI system will be able to connect to. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so how are we able to be passionate or dispassionate or creative to create even this live talk, but other things in our workplace. So those are just some of the things that come to mind as to why um, there's a case for, yes, absolutely, there's a fear and pause to be like, what do I share? How can I share things? But if unlocked, it actually can create a mutual benefit for both the employee and the employer. But it's all like across the spectrum of, do I have the trusting basis for doing that, and so forth. So those are things that just come to mind.
Yeah, definitely. For a while, I was like, I hope he's gonna get to a topic. But no, I think that you really covered a lot of really great, really important aspects of not only leadership, but what it really means to work in like a neurodivergent environment, which we all are, whether you know it or not, right? Whether people disclose or not, we're all different in the way we think. And that spectrum that you talk about is definitely, for some people, they're kind of in that bell curve of the norm. And then some people are on the outer edges. Um, and you
Yeah.
talked
So
about, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying, like, that's exactly that diversity. I didn't say that, but the kind of the individuality
Yeah.
um that we have, and maybe some of the baggage that we have with the mental challenges is what makes us awesome and can contribute to the creative mind of what we kind of bring to work. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's the thing that um, I would also suggest we consider.
absolutely. I think, y- you, um, you come from a perspective of compassion and welcoming diversity. But I think what you need to know from an employee's perspective is they don't, they may not even have that for themselves yet. So for them to be able to go to you and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, it's that extra kind of step that makes it difficult. So you talked about psychological safety and how that is an important part of sort of the corporate culture, what you create. So what are some of the things that you're doing that are creating that? And I say this because I know one of the answers already, because I have actually heard of many people that work for you, with you, saying really good things about you, shockingly, but they do. And I think one of the things I love is that you share about yourself and you share about your most vulnerable moments, like when you were really, really sick, and when you were, like, just, I didn't want to say the word, but when you nearly died, right? So then you talk about so you talk about that, you share about that. And I think in that sharing, it's actually part of like the 5 steps to creating psychological safety.
Yeah, it's about mirroring, and I think allowing to kind of lead a little bit by example in that area. So how can you create
Yeah.
that safe space? It's a fine line. Honestly, it took the episode you're describing in my critical illness that almost uh you know, killed me, I guess, is is it took some time to share that, but I do at least at our company, everyone would know that in our onboarding sessions, like I will share, because that has shaped sort of who I am, right, in a big way. And we have in our company, I'm just gonna, we have this, we have our a mental health awareness month right now, but there is so many things that have happened in society that have affected us as humans, whether it be social justice, issues. George Floyd a couple of years back, certainly the in Canada here, residential school systems, and I'll speak to those, very concretely in our company, because we had employees absolutely affected significantly, especially those who are Black identified with George Floyd killing. And how did we react to that? Like, how did the company? So there's one thing at the corporate level, and there's something at a leadership, like managerial level, that's even like deeper, right? So we had listening sessions. We did invite some speakers to share their lived experiences, but through that, people shared their own experiences as well. So that whole connective nature. So think of what the employer wants, or any good organization. They want loyalty, they want retention, they want to bring the best out of their people, they want to be people focused. All that kind of stuff was like goodness that came out of, I think, some of these activities. Growing up a Catholic too, with the residential school, and the unfortunate uncovering of what the impacts were there in Canada. We have had First Nations leaders, speak, and survivors address, that. Now, how does that relate to work? You'd be like, why do that, right? And I would say, once again, it's we all have those experiences, and how people have overcome some of those challenges, I think, is sort of the beauty in some of these stories too, right? So all these things sort of affect mental health, and while not being the expert, I think that they do bring about the best in people. Corporately, we have had leadership training, discussing how to be more empathetic and what that means, but then also having programs, as I'm sure many of you guys know, to offer counseling in terms of benefits and things like this, to have outlets for employees to lean on. So those are some of the support functions that I think an employer can do, an organization can do. But I think the more meaningful part is the connective stuff that occurs between a manager or leader and its employee. Because how do you show care? How do you show that? How can you build that loyalty? How can you that is probably the harder, and everyone has to find their own leadership or management style, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So being able to work with our leaders, at least in our organization, to try to unpack their leadership style is important, because you can read all these books, right? But Simon Sinek, I'm sure everyone or a lot of people will know and cite Simon Sinek. Leaders eat last, kind of thing, or whatever. I don't know what the saying is that he has, but something like this, of this nature. They're more corporate, but then we all have our own, our personal style of managing, leading people. I think that needs to be found and uncovered.
Yeah. I'm going to just pause our discussion for a moment and just go to a couple of the comments from the chat. And one thing that's interesting, you talk about Simon Sinek, just one more thing before, is that, he talks about the golden circles, right? Where why is at the center of what you do always. And I find that a lot of the times, employees don't know what their why is. And that creates problems, because then the what and the how will just not really be clear to them. So I think at the root of a lot of these issues within a company is sometimes it could be a lack of self-awareness as well, but people don't actually always proactively try to seek out self-awareness. So I think that's a tool that companies can offer to bring more of these issues to the forefront. So there's a comment here. Oh, there's a comment about Samara said, beautiful definition of leadership, Jay. Good stuff. And Bev said, thanks for the reminder that we all live in a neurodiverse space, which is so important, I think, to really be something to understand. And it's not that everyone has to operate the same way. And I know there's a lot of studies done about people living with different kinds of mental illness being really good at certain things. Like, fortunately or unfortunately, people living with anxiety can be really great at project management or detail-oriented things, because that's kind of how they're built. And then Ali said, around the topic of leaders providing psychological safety for direct report, she wants to add that how leader reacts in one-off emergencies can really dictate whether their direct reports will feel comfortable or not share an ongoing struggle, such as mental illness. And did you want to say something about this one, about how you react to one-off emergencies?
How I react?
Or just in general,
Yeah.
like I can see how this would be one of the ways leaders can build trust. It's really not just about there's so many ways that people will look to a leader to say, is this a safe person for me? And I think what Ali is saying, and Ali, feel free to add to this too. What she's saying here, it's about how they support a one-off emergency can really determine whether or not people are going to be comfortable sharing their ongoing struggles with this person.
I mean, life happens, right? So not everything is planned. When it's an emergency, we've all kind of seen that happen in our own
Yeah.
lives. I think there's accommodations that ideally a good manager or leader can provide in those circumstances. I think there's a responsibility, coming back to that, for for any worker, including myself, to share what is comfortable and fair, to not compromise and put at risk, call it, the company or the team. Now, and
Right.
I just think a bunch of examples kind of come to my head. I won't go unpack them all, but if there is some critical path project, whatever it might be, that is customer deadline, this and that and the other, no one wants to let down their team, right? I think so, right? But knowing what before it becomes too late, and one implodes, and it becomes emergency, it's so much better to mitigate that risk by having sort of the safer environment to kind of share, look, I am redlining here. I use in the company, people will share that. I'm like, when you can only redline for so long, and at some point, going back to the nature versus nurture, if we have this, we're born maybe biologically with certain traits, but we know there's triggers. Like you shared earlier today, that there was a trigger that occurred to you earlier this week. Well, are there things that that a team, a company can know to avoid those triggers? Now, I'm not saying that you can avoid everything, right? But if we do know what triggers, whether it be anxiety, pressures, whatever it may be, that can avoid that, and that's going to make the project or the mission, and also the employee more successful in achieving their goals. You know what I mean? So that's what kind of comes to mind. Emergency will happen. Is it better to like mitigate that? Yes. There are probably some ways that I'm just kind of sharing. I think that you can, do that if you can understand it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Ali, I hope that answered the question or addressed it. But let me know if you want to add anything else, Ali. So one thing I wanted to share as well is sort of like a personal story or personal connection, is that just kind of circling back to the concept of people are trying their best, and that they also want what's good for the company. If they chose to work at a company, they want to do the right thing for the company. I remember this being the biggest hurdle in my corporate training whenever I talk about the concept that people are trying their best. And this was done by Brene Brown in one of her research studies, where she sent out a survey to people saying, think of person that's giving you the most amount of trouble at work. Do you think that they're doing their best? And 25% of the respondents said yes. So 75% thought that person is not doing their best. And then she turned the question around and said, do you think you're doing your best? And the response was the opposite. 75% of the people felt that they were doing their best. So how would that be possible if the people who are working with them are saying they're not doing their best, but they feel like that they are? And that's the really hard part, I think, around mental illness, is that your analogy of the condo or the house, you only know a little bit, right? You only peer in through, like, more about my life than many other people know about my life, but it's still just a slice. You didn't know that I was in bed for 4 days, because that's not really important for you to know. What's important is that I can show up today to do this talk. But I know, because of our relationship and our trust, that if I couldn't show up today, you would be okay with it. You'll be like, of course, if Yolanda could show up, she will. But if she can't, she's trying her best. Right? But people who are working together don't always have that kind of knowledge or trust of each other. And I remember this is always a part of the training that I have to work really hard at to convince them. And one example that I always use is actually about breastfeeding. I talk about breastfeeding my daughter and having to stop because I needed to take medication to stabilize my mood. So does that make me a bad mother? Or one that is related to you and I, when you were in the hospital, I was hit with a really depressive episode. So I couldn't visit you in the hospital. And I held so much guilt about that, right? That I'm such a bad friend. You have always been there for me. How could I not be there for you? And even like recent years, I said, are you still mad at me? And you're like, no, I didn't think about it. But it's all of those things that happen underneath, like, what we project, right? Like, what you see in that window. I think that makes it really challenging for that true connectedness that you're talking about. And as many layers, like, we're like onions, right? We're like just peeling away all these different layers of things that we live with or deal with. But at the end of the day, I agree with what you said, is that the responsibility goes both ways. The employer can be there as support and holding the space, the safe space, but it's also up to the employee to share what they're comfortable with sharing. So that's just something I kind of wanted to share, that I noticed through the conversations that are coming up for me.
Yeah, the point that you kind of struck out to me there is like there's this huge gap of dissonance, 25 to 75%. Like, why is that? So that probably suggests that there is, at least to me, like maybe this bias and a lack of maybe trust and intentionality around, like, is that person best intended? Do they actually care? And the word I use for caring, I think, comes from two. Like, you care about your colleagues and your employees. You have to care about the quality of work and how you are moving things forward. So I think that falls on the onus of the employee for sure. And uh I so those are the kind of things that I'm just picking out in your stat there that you called out there.
Yeah, and I think another component of the huge difference is what you know about yourself, but there's no way for you to know everything that's going on for another person. So you can say, I'm definitely doing my best because like what your best is, but you don't actually know what someone else's best is. And that changes depending on, if they have an active episode of their illness, any kind of illness, really. So yeah, I definitely agree. So I
Yeah.
think I'm just going to open the floor up to any questions that people might have, or anything that you want us to talk about, address. Oh, here's one. So Kim wrote, as a leader, you may be understanding and empathetic to an individual situation, but how do you go about developing trust and empathy amongst team members who maybe don't trust that others are doing their best? Thank you, Kim.
Um. Yeah. Thank you, Kim. It's so one of my I've thought about this question a lot, or this kind of call it problem, and at least in our company, well, one of our missions is about driving sustainability, supply chains. That aside are on sustainable and supply chains, but sustainable companies can't be without sustainable leaders. There's nothing more important to an organization than its people. And going back to the definition of what is leadership, um, it's only sustainable if it's recursive. Now, hear me out for a moment. If an organization can develop a leader that can develop a leader that can develop a leader, then you actually have something, because we all are leaders, even those who don't have authority, right? So we all lead in kind of in our own ways. So I think that, so that's the backdrop of what goes to my mind when, Kim, your question is, how do you go with developing trust and empathy amongst team members who don't who are not maybe doing their best? um I think that it's um a good leader will not ask its team members or team to do something that they're not willing themselves to do. And I think that leading by that example can help. I think creating more connectivity between um and empathy between you know an entire organization is, and in today's world it's difficult. Like, we're all virtual here on this live stream, right? And that's why I think bringing people together as much as possible, physically, experiencing things together, and like I talk about those um you know s- uh safe space sort of, or listening sessions, can help in that regard. But I'd love to hear from others, what you guys think to develop trust and empathy.
So I'll add something to that while we wait for more people to respond. I think, I really appreciate Kim bringing this up, because it's one thing for, let's say, the top leader to be okay with, or have this feeling of compassion and empathy, but it's not always easy to have that trickle down perfectly across like everybody. Especially when you have a larger company, like, Panda Mandarin, we have, 10 people. So it's a lot easier for that kind of feeling to expand. But for a company, like a larger company like Nulogy, like you guys have so many people, how do you make sure that that kind of company culture is really propagated through all the different levels? So I can see that
Yeah.
being really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I know some members from our team are here. I mean, we try to build as much transparency on the work that is being done and the goals that are, and we could do better, absolutely. But I think that you can't know everything. But if there is a way to create more transparency around what work is being done and what are the learnings and efforts that are made towards a mission that's important. I think another way. Oh, so Samara has maybe a question on.
Yeah, Samara, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi guys, thank you. So I haven't worked in corporate world for a while. I've been off a little bit and I have done a lot of entrepreneurial work. But I was thinking, like, I wonder how it would work, and maybe it happens if people get a chance to sort of talk about, like, what are their triggers or what are their boundaries, like what are their needs kind of in the workplace, like if they have that space and sort of like they get that permission, like maybe it's they need a movement break, or maybe they need like to meditate for 10 minutes, like whatever they may need. And if it's like, permissible within the space, it's reasonable, so that sort of opens the space so people feel comfortable asking for what they need, like to stay balanced in the workplace. I'm like really into wellness for managing my conditions. So, but I think just opening that talk. So it's like, I know there's like performance reviews, like for example, in workplaces where we go over our criteria for achieving goals, but like how about like for achieving our wellness? And I think it could help with somebody who has a mental illness or who doesn't, because mental health affects everyone, right? So, and so physical, because we have our bodies to manage too. So I'm wondering if that could be something commonplace in companies where there's, and maybe it's happening, Jason, in your company where you do check-ins with people. Like I'm not there, so I don't know, but just sort of having that space for people, like, I don't know, it could be like a quarterly thing, or I don't know, a yearly thing. I'm not really sure how to implement, but
Well, I mean, corporately, we've made intentionally in our company uh, certain time frames and weeks that are like no meetings, to encourage people to have sort of their own sort of mental space. We have a program in our company, called Summer Splash. I won't go through that in detail, but in short, it is to give a bit of relief around that period of time to do people's own creative endeavors. Let's call it that way. But all that kind of stuff does contribute, I think, to the company's mission. And as much as you can make that connective. Software company, like, there's developers, so we have hackathons and hack days, and that's like, okay, we're taking away productive time, let's call it, from but then that gives maybe some creative time towards maybe some other work. But we also try to we celebrate what has been learned and what has been achieved during those, so that it gets brought back as into the organization for maybe some, and it has resulted in real innovative breakthroughs when you kind of give some of that space, you know what I mean, that's outside of the day to day. Hopefully that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I do believe like the human brain needs those breaks to be most productive. Like I know there's lots of research. I know my brain does. I know children's brains do. Like, we get that exercise, we get some break, like, our subconscious works on projects. So I'm glad your company has those spaces for people. And then, you get more productivity.
Yeah, like coming back to that fight or flight thing, we kind of know that when we have more oxytocin, if you call it, you're going to be maybe versus like the what is it, cortisol. I think I'm not, but like you want to get away from that, right? You're gonna constrain the creative space. You're not gonna probably be at your best. You're gonna think of fighting or flighting and that kind of thing versus can you create a environment of innovation and creativity, which I think is what humans are not not like I described the AI systems, like we're going to be more important in the future if we are able to tap into that layer that a chip can't do, if that makes sense. So that's our strength, right? So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the human brain's amazing.
It certainly is, and confusing. So I know we're at time now. I don't know if Jay can stay for a few more minutes because I know Jen has a question. Is that okay? Can you stay for a few minutes?
Yeah.
But for everyone that may need to leave, I just wanted to mention that I'm hosting the Courage Circle on Fridays at noon. So that's tomorrow. And it was a really beautiful experience last week. So if you want to join, let me know. And if you have to go now, like, please feel free to go. I'm going to send out the replay with any other questions that we can cover for the next 5 minutes. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. And all right, Jen, go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, no. So I just wanted to share that I'm actually on a leave of absence for bipolar. It started off with a stress leave, and then it turned into a hypomania episode. So I'm actually stated to return to work May 15th. So it's coming up. I do feel a lot better, which is great. So I'm just toying with the idea of how much I share with my team in our return, because I want to be, because I'm also a leader. I also have about 20 or 30 people around the world that I manage. And I'm sure they all have questions and are wondering, where did Jen go? I did share with some people it was a stress leave. I didn't share it was also bipolar related. So I'm toying with how much to open up and share to be transparent, so that if they have a similar issue, they can come to me because I'm their, work manager. So I'm toying with that idea of what I share when I return, because I'm sure they have lots of questions as to where did I go for 2.5 months? And like some of them are friends with me on Facebook and they see me, I'm like going to shows, I'm like doing all these fun things, and they're probably like, she doesn't look like she's sick. But I'm going through a hypomania episode where I am very extroverted. So they probably are wondering, like, is she really sick or what's going on with Jen? But yeah.
Jay, you want to weigh in on this first?
Sure. Thanks for sharing, first of all. I'm sure it's been challenging and difficult to contemplate whether, how you come back and what you share. And I think it's a very personal, component, first of all. Second of all, I would say in the beginning, while there's a fear, like, consider the counter factual, where if you are able to maybe provide a glimpse to the window of what you've experienced, that might be connective to your team as a leader in your company, as you mentioned. For others, because it's as a leader, as you know, it's less about you, but it's about the others. So how can then that might gravitate and in fact say, wow, like Jen shared this with me. But like I said, it's very personal. There might be some silver linings and positive experiences that you had while coming back that you've now been able to not only come back at your best, hopefully, but introspectively reflected on to be like, oh, now I have to, or these are the triggers, or these are the things that I've learned, and this is what I want to share with you. Those are the things that could be positive. But I get the fear of being let's say categorized, or like they coming back to the thing, like no one wants to be seen as different. But at the same time, it's that there's beauty in diversity, there's beauty in differences, because that individuality is what's gonna be embraced, I think, possibly more so in the future, as a lot of us are maybe even scared to share things now, because it's like, what's going to go on media, what's going to be shared, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, I mean, I do feel like a success story over the last 2 months. Like, I've been going to the gym every day. I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped caffeine too. And like, I've been going to church, and like, I feel like I've done a whole like 180 on myself for wellness. So it feels good. And so yeah, so I'll consider like the balance of how much to share and how much not to share, and what's the appropriate level of openness I should have. But I don't want to also leave them in the dark, because they're probably gonna wonder when I come back, like, where'd you go? What'd you do? And like, how come, I'm seeing a lot of posts on Facebook, you look fine. So so but yeah, so I'm just toying with that. But thanks for your response.
Yeah. And Jen, thanks for sharing. And I know I chatted about this before, about what I shared when I went back to work. And it's such a personal choice, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity. But it's just got to be an opportunity that you're ready for. And whether that's going to contribute to your own well-being and healing, that's something that only you would know. But legally, there's a lot of laws protecting people living with mental illness. And as soon as you disclose, employers have to accommodate with reasonable, reasonable accommodations for you. So there are benefits in disclosing, but there are also emotional baggage that could come with disclosing as well. Even for my own company, it took me a while for me to actually disclose to my own team. And it was because I thought, if I did, are they going to look at me differently? Are they going to listen to me? And are they going to question me? So it took me a while too. But when I did finally tell them, it really created a wave of compassion and empathy in the people that I work with. So that was really, really special, but you have to just be ready for it. Mm-hmm. So thank you all so much for being here. And I want to say thank you so much to my awesome friend, Jay. It's not like a conversation that is easy to have, because there's no script that we can follow. It's really just like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And it's so nice to be able to have this conversation with so many like-minded people. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity, for your participation, Jay. Like, thank you so much for being here.
Same. Looking forward to hosting you at our company for a talk too.
Yes, that's right. I'm also going to do a talk at Analogy about psychological safety and self-awareness. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And I don't think I made fun of you too much either. Brian didn't message me. Nobody messaged me to say, get back on topic. All right.
I was self-deprecating myself, so it's all good.
That is true. That is true. You're good at that for sure. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you next week or tomorrow for the Courage Circle. Bye.